Hey, good day, everyone. So again, today we're going to talk about the basics of data networks. Again, what are data networks? We'll start to talk about that first, and then we'll talk about the OSI model, which is usually kind of the first thing that you look at when you're starting to, dive into computer networks. What are data networks? See, data networks are something that when we're using networks to transfer our data, right? What kind of networks do we have? So first of all, we have big businesses like service providers. In our example, we could use somebody like a Bell, who's a service provider. For them, data is a product. Data network is a product where they are giving you the networks to kind of move your stuff. So they will give you the network where you can put your data and take it from point A to point B. So let's say if I have an office in Toronto and I have an office in Montreal, and I want to go to the service provider, say, okay, give me a connection where from where I can take it from, point A, point to point B. In this case, as I was saying, it's about going from Toronto to Montreal. Right now, again, I can use private links, which are a little more expensive, and or we can always use the internet. Again, we're not going to get into details of what these different options are, but just to give you an idea that these companies use networks as a product. Then when you talk about enterprise networks, right, doesn't matter what business you are today, you will definitely have some sort of network. Again, if you're a small company, you might have a basic firewall with a switch and an access point. If you're a big company like a Walmart or a Canadian Tire, you might have very big networks where you have a data center, you also have so many stores, so you have network for each stores, and you might have some presence in the cloud as well, right? So it all depends. So as I said already, they are so important these days because the way I look at it is today your business is as successful as your network is, right? Or you can say your business is as efficient as your network. COVID, I think, taught us a lot as well. Basically, you saw that how suddenly people moved from going into schools to doing online schooling, or we saw a lot of people going into retail stores to buy their stuff versus starting to order stuff online, right? So that's a shift. Is my business ready for it? Is my network ready for it? That's the answer. And again, as I said, they do come in different sizes. It could be as big, or it could be a very small network as well, right? So this is kind of, in a nutshell, what a data network is. Now, when we start talking about data networks, as I mentioned, we always talk about OSI model. Now, what is an OSI model? See, again, it's an architecture. It's a 7-layer architecture, which gives you an idea of, okay, how do I move my networks? So it's like, think of that as an architecture, that like an idea that I have been that you have been given, right? So in this case, let's go from the bottom and go up. So the bottom layer is the physical layer, which is also the layer one, which is the raw transmission. This is where your, uh, you know, um, zeros and ones are going to be transferred, right? Now, again, I could use a wire or I can use wireless, but that's basically your physical. So again, if I'm using wireless, which is most commonly, I would say Wi-Fi or 4G, 5G, or I can use Ethernet again, which is, or a fiber, which is most cases my wired connection, right? And then you have the data where you have the physical addressing, network layer, which is layer 3. This is where usually I'll have my uh, route. Okay, where do I go from here? And then you have your transport where I chop my data into small sometimes, and depending on what protocol am I using, it mostly what you see here is going to be TCP or UDP. See, session is something that, for example, if I'm logging on to my banking, right? And from my banking, from my home, let's say I click on my credit card, now show me my accounts, now show me my mortgage. I'm going into different parts. Every time I click into these parts of the website, it's not kind of really, making me log in all over again. I've already logged in. It's just that it's maintaining my session. So that's my state of connection, right? Then you have the type of file, which really means is the file that I'm working with. Is it a Word document? Is it a JPEG? Is it a PDF? What exactly is it, right? And then the application itself. This is where our human interaction, this is where we interact with the actual application, right? Now, this is a nutshell of what an OSI model is. Again, as I mentioned, these are different layers, 7 layers in our case, uh, and it just gives us some sort of infrastructure. How do I move my data from application to physical, and then when I go on the other side, from physical back to application, so somebody can receive it. Another model that gets talked a lot about is a TCP IP model. Now, what's the comparison there is this right here, right? Now, if you think through this, it's exactly the same. The main difference is that the application presentation and the session layer are kind of, diffused as one layer. and this is where they all live. See, again, what does the TCP provide? Nothing different than what OSI was doing. It's providing that end-to-end connectivity. It's basically specifying how the data is formatted or addressed, as I said. So basically, the idea is I want to transmit that data, how my data is transmitted, how is it routed when I'm going through a network, and then how is it received at that destination, right? So again, it's giving you that architecture. And then if you look through all these different layers, there are certain protocols that we usually work with. Now, some of you might recognize few of them, some of you might not. And again, in future, what I'm planning to do is we'll kind of dig into each and every protocol and see what the function of that each protocol is, right? So again, going from very basic here, from physical, as I mentioned already, you have the Ethernet or you have the Wi-Fi, most common one, and then you have data link, and then network, you have your IP, which is the more common one. You will hear your ICMP. This is where your ping and and trace route are. ARP, we'll talk about them in future. As I mentioned, transport, the most common ones, TCP, UDP. TCP being your, uh, you know, three-way handshake connection oriented protocol. UDP, which is again, it's a connectionless protocol where it's mainly used for your voice, where you don't want to really waste any time in establishing any connection. Again, if it's not making sense to you, let's not worry about that now. Application, it might vary, right? So HTTP, again, most common, where I'm using my uh, browsers for doing all that, DNS, DHCP, and all those. One thing I want to address before I close this video is, what's the difference between layer and a protocol, right? Now, see, again, in context of OSI model or TCP, each layer has a specific job, right? That it's doing to send data or receive the data. It's like, think of this as breaking down a big task into a smaller and a more manageable part, where I'm saying, okay, you manage this part for me and you manage this part for me. Protocol is more like it's a set of rules or guidelines, right, that a device will follow. So for example, if I'm driving a car, protocol would be, okay, if you see a red, you got to stop. That's a protocol. Everybody needs to follow that. It's an understood thing, right? If it's a green, you go, right? So these are the kind of rules that you have, right? So these are more protocols than you when you're talking about. So this is kind of where the difference is between a layer and a protocol. Another example I would like to give is, think about this. Let's say if I'm trying to send a letter, right? If I'm breaking down that process into a smaller, you know I would say task. Okay, write a letter, put it into an envelope, write your address, who's going to send, who are you sending it to, and then go to the mailbox and drop that letter there. So that's like each layer has a process, right? That's like each layer has a function. Now protocol would be a standard, right? So okay, you use a certain size of envelope, or you, when you write the address of the person you're sending to, always write that address in the middle of the envelope, and address of the person who's of the sender is going to be on the top right, and the person who you're sending the letter to, that's in the middle. So you get the point, right? So it's like there are a certain set of rules that you use always uh, in order to do something. So that's a protocol. A layer means I'm breaking that task into smaller, a little task, as you might say. So this is kind of an easy way of imagining things. Hope that was helpful. Again, as I always say, if you have any other topic, let me know. We can talk on that. But again, each of these nuggets will be small, and they will be just focused on a very specific small topic. Okay, I hope you have a good day.